In 1887, Dr. Wilhelm Ritter von Wymetal interviewed William Law, who was the second counselor to Mormon prophet Joseph Smith in the first presidency of the church. Law gave many interesting and detailed insights into the early Mormon church and its leaders in Nauvoo, Illinois. The interview went as follows. What position had Rockwell in Joseph's house? Rockwell was the lackey of the house. He used to comb and shave Joseph, blackened his boots, and drove his carriage. He would have done anything Joe wanted him to do. I never saw a horse or carriage belonging to Rockwell, which you say he got from Joseph for the attempt to kill Boggs. I suppose that you originated the expositor, Dr. Law. Yes, I originated the idea to publish that paper. I had friends in many parts of the country. They knew that I had become a member of the Mormon religion. I wanted to show them, by publishing the paper, that I had not been in a fraud willingly. I started the idea, and my brother, Wilson, stood to me like a brother should. I don't remember whether it was I, or not, who gave the name expositor. But I and my brother, we gave the money, about $2,000. I gave the biggest part. The Higbees etc. had scarcely $1 in it. You were well off at that time, Dr. Law. We had property to the amount of about $30,000, which was a good deal in those days. We had farms in Nauvoo, city lots, and our residences. My brother had a fine brick 2-story building. By starting the expositor, we lost nearly everything. Didn't you have a store and a mill? Yes, we had a large steam flour and sawmill and a store. It would have been the smart thing to do, to remain quiet, sell our property without noise, for what we could get and move away. That would have been smart, but I wasn't cool and smart then. I wanted to do my duty and nothing else, and didn't care for the consequences, not a bit. Many friends advised me to be smart and remain quiet, but I would not hear of it, and spoke my mind whenever an opportunity offered. When the Smiths saw that we were against them, then they applied to us their usual system, that is, to freeze us out. Secret orders went out that nobody could buy property without the permission of Joseph Smith, Hiram, or the authorities, as they called them, so our property was practically worthless. Yes, my brother Wilson stood to me like a man, fully, fearlessly. He died, here in Schulzberg, of a stroke of apoplexy, after an illness of 3 days, 10 years ago. He was a very fine and tremendously strong man. He wrestled with Joe in Nauvoo and threw him on his back. How did you become a Mormon, Dr. John Taylor and Almond W. Babbitt came as missionaries to Canada and preached where I lived, 25 miles south of Toronto. I believe that Taylor was sincere then, and I believe he was to a late day. Finally, the greed of power and money killed his conscience. There was now and then a good man in Mormondom. For instance, William Marks. He was a very good man and knew as little of the secret crimes of the leaders as I knew myself. The letters you wrote me made me suppose that the Smiths tried to kill you when they saw an enemy in you. They tried to get rid of me in different ways. One was by poisoning. I was already out of the church when Hiram called one day and invited me for the next day to a reconciliation dinner, as he called it, to his house. He said Joseph would come too. He invited me and my wife. He was very urgent about the matter, but I declined the invitation. Now I must tell you that I, in those dangerous days, did not neglect to look out somewhat for the safety of my person, and that I kept a detective or two among those who were in the confidence of the Smiths. That very same evening of the day on which Hiram had been to my house inviting me, my detective told me that they had conceived the plan to poison me at the reconciliation dinner. Their object was a double one. My going to the dinner would have shown to the people that I was reconciled, and my death would have freed them of an enemy. You may imagine that I didn't regret having declined that amiable invitation. Have you had any knowledge of cases of poisoning in Nauvoo ordered by the authorities? I know that several men, 6 or 7, died under very suspicious circumstances. Among them were 2 secretaries of the prophet, Mulholland and Blaskill Thompson. I saw Mulholland die and the symptoms looked very suspicious to me. Dr. Foster, who was a very good physician, believed firmly that those 6 or 7 men had been poisoned, and told me so repeatedly. What may have been the reason for poisoning the secretaries? They knew too much, probably. What do you know about the Danites? Nothing of my personal knowledge. They existed, but their workings were kept very secret. I never belonged to the initiated. Smith tried very hard to get them to kill me. One day my detective told me that 2 Danites had gone to Joseph and told him that they wanted to put me out of the way. Joseph said, "Don't. He is too influential. His death would bring the country down upon us. Wait." Later, when I was thoroughly aware of my danger, they tried in all manners to use me up, and had Danites all day and night after me. But I looked out and kept myself safe. Whatever there was of crime in Nauvoo was kept secret. On the outside everything looked nice and smooth. There were lots of strangers every Sunday as visitors, and then the best speakers were put on the stand as samples of the fruits of this fine religion. Did Emma, the elect lady, come to your house and complain about Joseph? No, she never came to my house for that purpose, but I met her sometimes on the street, and then she used to complain, especially because of the girls whom Joseph kept in the house, devoting his attention to them. You have overrated her. She was dishonest. Do you mean to say that she was so outside of the influence Joseph had over her? Yes, that is exactly what I mean. Let me tell you a case that will be foolproof to you. Soon after my arrival in Nauvoo, the two Lawrence girls came to the Holy City. Two very young girls, 15 to 17 years of age. They had been converted in Canada, were orphans and worth about $8,000 in English gold. Joseph got to be appointed their guardian, probably with the help of Dr. Bennett. He naturally put the gold in his pocket and had the girls sealed to him. He asked me to go on his bond as a guardian, as Sidney Rigdon had done. It is only a formality, he said. Foolishly enough, and not yet suspecting anything, I put my name on the paper. Emma complained about Joseph's living with the Lawrence girls, but not very violently. It is my conviction that she was his full accomplice, that she was not a bit better than he. When I saw how things went, I should have taken steps to be released of that bond, but I never thought of it. After Joseph's death, Almond W. Babbitt became guardian of the two girls. He asked Emma for a settlement about the $8,000. Emma said she had nothing to do with her husband's debts. Now Babbitt asked for the books and she gave them to him. Babbitt found that Joseph had counted an expense of about $3,000 for board and clothing of the girls. Now Babbitt wanted the $5,000 that was to be paid. Babbitt, who was a straight, good, honest, sincere man, set about to find out property to pay the $5,000 with. He could find none. Two splendid farms near Nauvoo, a big brick house, worth from $3,000 to $4,000. The hotel kept by Joe, a mass of vacant town lots, all were in Emma's name, not transferred later, but transferred from the beginning. She always looked out for her part. When I saw how things stood, I wrote to Babbitt to take hold of all the property left by me in Nauvoo, and of all claims held by me again in people in Nauvoo, and so the debt was paid by me. Emma didn't pay a cent. I told you that the Smiths tried to poison me. When Joseph saw that I had no great appetite for reconciliation dinners, he tried with the Indians. The plan was that somebody should use me up who was not openly connected with the church. He was yet afraid of the people because of my influence. Later he would have killed me without any regard. One day about 100 Redskins came to town and 20 or 30 were sent to my house. We tried to get rid of them, but could not. And we saw clearly that they had a dark plan for the night. But we had to keep them, gave them blankets, and they were all night in our hall. Wilson Law, I, and some friends though, kept good watch all night, with barricaded windows and doors and guns and pistols ready. You have known the parents of the prophet, old Lucy and old Joe, the Abraham of this new dispensation. Oh, yes, I knew them. Old Lucy was in her dotage at that time. She seemed a harmless old woman. Old Joe sold blessings, so much ahead, always in the same style, that my sons should be emperors, and my daughters mothers of queens, and that everybody should have as many children as there was sands on the shore. Old Joe was an old tramp. How about Dr. Bennett? Bennett was very smart and clever, but a thorough scoundrel. Never could find out the reason of his downfall. Mrs. Pratt was a most excellent, pure woman, but the fact that Bennett visited her sometimes was used by Joseph to ruin her character. He had his spies everywhere, and if a woman refused him, he sent his fellows out to whisper stories around about her. What do you remember about Emma's relations to the revelation on celestial marriage? Well, I told you that she used to complain to me about Joseph's escapades whenever she met me on the street. She spoke repeatedly about that pretended revelation. She said once, "The revelation says I must submit or be destroyed. Well, I guess I have to submit." On another day she said, "Joe and I have settled our troubles on the basis of equal rights." Emma was a full accomplice of Joseph's crimes. She was a large, coarse woman, as deep a woman as there was, always full of schemes and smooth as oil. They were worthy of each other. She was not a particle better than he. You think that Joseph was an infidel? Yes, that he was I have not the slightest doubt. What proofs have I? Well, my general and intimate knowledge of his character. And is it possible that a man who ascribes all kinds of impudent lies to the Lord could have been anything else but an infidel? Did you ever see the celebrated peepstone? No, I never saw it, and I never saw Joseph giving a revelation. But Hiram told me once that Joseph, in his younger years, used to hunt for hidden treasures with a peepstone. Was Joseph a habitual drunkard? I don't believe he was. I only saw him drunk once. I found Joseph and Hiram at a place where they kept quantities of wine. I remember that Joseph drank heavily, and that I talked to Hiram begging him to take his brother away. But that was the only time I saw the prophet drunk. Have you ever heard of the old woman that was drowned in the interest of the church? I have heard of a woman being put aside. They said she had been brought over the river and buried on an island near the shore, or on the other shore, near the water. But at that time I did not believe a word of rumors of this kind, and did not investigate them. Did you ever hear of abortion being practiced in Nauvoo? Yes, there was some talk about Joseph getting no issue from all the women he had intercourse with. Dr. Foster spoke to me about the fact, but I don't remember what was told about abortion. If I heard things of the kind, I didn't believe in them at that time. Joseph was very free in his talk about his women. He told me one day of a certain girl and remarked that she had given him more pleasure than any girl he had ever enjoyed. I told him it was horrible to talk like this. What do you know about robbery being practiced for the benefit of the church? That sort of business was kept very secret. Hiram had once a very fine, brand new blue suit, and people told me the suit was the produce of the spoils of the Gentiles. I have no doubt that Hiram played an important role in this department of church affairs. I think I can prove it. There was one day a little council called in Hiram's office, and I was invited to come. Joseph called at my house and took me to the little council. 8 or 10 were present, all leaders in the church. Hiram made a long argument. Said he, "The Missourians have robbed, plundered, and murdered our people. We should take our revenge on them as thoroughly as possible and regain what we have lost in Missouri. The simplest way would be if our people would go to Missouri and buy their horses and cattle on credit and then not pay for them. And our merchants would go to St. Louis and take their large quantities of goods on credit and then, when the notes became due, simply not pay them. Our people always go there and pay for everything. That's foolish, very foolish, but it is just the thing that, for instance, brother-in-law is doing. He has paid thousands of dollars there, but get all these things from them for nothing. Horses, cattle, and goods that would help the people wonderfully. Our merchants should transfer all they have, not only their stock in trade, but their lots, houses, and farms too, to their wives and friends in general, so that the creditors could not get a cent out of them." Some of those present applauded the proposition and said that would be only fair. I said nothing. Then somebody said, "Brother-in-law has said nothing." I said, "This seems to me not only wrong and unjust, but at the same time very ridiculous, because it is not practicable. You cannot buy horses and cattle on credit without having established a credit by long trading, and as to St. Louis, I was always of the opinion that the people there had been very good to the Mormons. So you would ruin your friends to injure your enemies, punish the innocent to hurt the guilty. The St. Louis merchants were surely not the men that persecuted you in Missouri." Hiram got up, furious, ready to attack me, but Joseph rose and said, "I move that we adjourn this meeting. Brother-in-law has said his opinion, and that is all you wanted from him." Joseph went home with me, and on the way he told me that he shared my views fully, and that I had exactly spoken his mind. He praised me very much for the justice and honesty of my views. "I did not talk," said he, "since you took the very words from my lips." I need not tell you that this was diplomacy on Joseph's part, but Hiram hated me from that moment, and never forgave me for what I had said at that little council. But Hiram hated me for another reason. Was that in the robbery line too? No, that was from a political reason. It was because I opposed him in the dirty political trade he made with Hoge against Walker. Walker had bought Joseph's influence by declaring that the city charter of Nauvoo secured the habeas corpus. I stood by them when Joseph promised that he should have 9 out of every 10 Mormon votes. But Hiram went to Galena to meet the Democratic convention there and promised the support of the church to Mr. Hoge for a seat in Congress. Yes, General Hiram Smith was to sit in Congress next year. Saturday came and I went to Hiram and had a talk with him. He said he would tell the people to vote for Hoge, and I said I would oppose him on the stand. He made objections but finally had to consent to my speaking on the stand in this matter. When it came to the speaking in public, Hiram did all he could to obstruct me by putting long-winded speakers on the stand, one after the other, so that it was nearly dark when I got on the stand. Now, I showed the people how shamefully they had treated Mr. Walker, and I made such an impression that they began to shout for Mr. Walker. Then, Hiram jumped on the stand and declared that he had a revelation from the Lord, that the people should vote for Mr. Hoge. This was Saturday. Sunday morning I went to Joseph and told him what Hiram had done. We went over to the meeting and Joseph told Hiram what I had said. Hiram insisted that he had had a revelation. "Oh," said Joseph, "if this is a revelation, then it is all right." And he went on the stand and said to the people, "My office is so high that I could not think of bothering the Lord with political affairs. But Brother Hiram has had a revelation. When the Lord speaks, let the people obey." Had you ever some dramatic scene with Joseph about the difficulties between you and him? He avoided me. But once I got hold of him in the street and told him in very plain terms what I thought of him. I said, "You are a hypocrite and a vulgar scoundrel. You want to destroy me." Instead of knocking me down, which he could have done very easily, being so much bigger and stronger than I, he went away hurriedly, without uttering a single word. "Were you in Nauvoo when the expositor was destroyed?" "No, I was in Carthage. There was a meeting at the courthouse, many people were present, and it was considered what should be done regarding the Mormons. I think Stephen A. Douglas was present at the meeting. My friends urged me to come to Carthage with the press immediately. No conclusion was arrived at. The same evening we went home, and when we came to Nauvoo, we rode over our type that was scattered in the street, and over our broken office furniture. The work of Joseph's agents had been very complete. It had been done by a mob of about 200. The building, a new, pretty brick structure, had been perfectly gutted. Not a bit had been left of anything. Had anything been prepared for a second number? Yes, the inside of number 2 had been set up. Seeing what had been done, I made my abode, for safety's sake, at my brother's. I left Nauvoo on a large new steam ferry boat, which transported me, my family, and my brother to Burlington, Iowa. While we had people packing our things in my house, we rode, my brother and I, through the city in an open carriage, to show that we were not afraid. Did you ever see Joseph again after you left Nauvoo? Only once. I saw him in Carthage at the trial. We spoke not to each other and he seemed greatly preoccupied. We left Nauvoo on the second day after the passing of the ordinance which put the press under the absolute will of Joseph and his creatures. This ordinance gave them power to imprison and fine us at liberty. What opinion have you of Governor Ford? Ford made a good impression upon me. He was surely a good, straight man. What kind of a life did the prophet lead in Nauvoo? Joseph lived in great plenty. He entertained his friends and had a right good time. He was a jolly fellow. I don't think that in his family tea and coffee were used, but they were served to the strangers when he entertained as tavern keeper. At least, I suppose so. The Smiths had plenty of money. Why, when I came to Nauvoo I paid Hiram $700 in gold for a barren lot, and at that rate they sold any amount of lots after having got the land very cheap, to be sure. Their principle was to weaken a man in his purse, and in this way take power and influence from him. Weaken everybody. That was their motto. Joseph's maxim was, when you have taken all the money a fellow has got, you can do with him whatever you please. What became of Dr. Bennett? The last thing I heard of him was that he went up the river with a large lot of fancy fowls, a speculation of his. What do you know about the revelation on polygamy? The way I heard of it was that Hiram gave it to me to read. I was never in a high council where it was read, all stories to the contrary notwithstanding. Hiram gave it to me in his office, told me to take it home and read it, and then be careful with it and bring it back again. I took it home and read it and showed it to my wife. She and I were just turned upside down by it. We did not know what to do. I said to my wife that I would take it over to Joseph and ask him about it. I did not believe that he would acknowledge it, and I said so to my wife. But she was not of my opinion. She felt perfectly sure that he would father it. When I came to Joseph and showed him the paper, he said, "Yes, that is a genuine revelation." I said to the prophet, "But in the book of Doctrine and Covenants there is a revelation just the contrary of this." "Oh," said Joseph, "that was given when the church was in its infancy. Then, it was all right to feed the people on milk. But now it is necessary to give them strong meat." We talked a long time about it. Finally our discussion became very hot and we gave it up. From that time the breach between us became more open and more decided every day, after having been prepared for a long time. But the revelation gave the finishing touch to my doubts, and showed me clearly that he was a rascal. I took the revelation back to my wife and told her that Joseph had acknowledged it. "That is what I fully expected," said she. "What shall we do?" said I. She advised me to keep still, try to sell my property quietly for what I could get. But I did not follow her advice. My heart was burning. I wanted to tread upon the viper. "You returned the revelation to Hiram?" "Yes, I did. I was astonished to see in your book that the revelation was such a long document. I remember distinctly that the original given me by Hiram was much shorter. It covered not more than 2 or 3 pages of foolscap. The contents are substantially the same, but there was not that theological introduction. The thing consisted simply in the command of doing it, and that command was restricted to the high priesthood, and to virgins and widows. But as to Joseph himself, the Lord's chosen servant, it was restricted to virgins only, to clean vessels, from which to procure a pure seed to the Lord. In what manner would Joseph succeed to keep you and others from knowing what was going on behind the curtain? Marks, Ivies, I, and some others had, for a long time, no idea of the depravity that was going on. This was simply the result of a very smart system adopted by the prophet and his intimate friends, like Brigham Young, Kimball, and others. They first tried a man to see whether they could make a criminal tool out of him. When they felt that he would not be the stuff to make a criminal of, they kept him outside the inner circle, and used him to show him up as an example of their religion, as a good, virtuous, universally respected brother. Was Joseph a coward? Yes, he was a coward, and so was Hiram. You see it already in the fact that when I attacked him on the street with most violent words, he did not dare to answer a word. How did the prophets dress? Joe and Hiram were always dressed well, generally in blue, sometimes in black. Joseph was a fine man, no doubt of it. How was it with Joseph's wrestling? The forces of the prophet in this line have been exaggerated. My brother Wilson wrestled once with him, and he laid him down on the floor like a baby. Wilson could throw a lead bar much farther than Joe could. But Wilson was an uncommonly fine and strong man, over 6 feet. He could hold a weight of 56 pounds on his little finger and write his name on the wall in big letters. Joseph was flabby. He never worked at anything, and that probably made him so. Rockwell did everything about the house. Had you any idea that there was a sort of conspiracy to kill Joseph in jail? No, I had no idea. No idea. I had been ruined by that man. All my property was gone. All my dearest illusions destroyed, and through my connection with him I got a black spot on my life, which will pain me to the very last minute of my existence. But I tell you, no. If I had had any idea of any such scheme, I would have taken steps to stop it. I have always considered the killing of Joseph Smith a wrong action. It is my opinion that he deserved his fate fully, much more than thousands of men who paid the penalty of their crime to Judge Lynch. But I would have preferred that he should have been tried by court and sent to the penitentiary. Did you practice medicine in Nauvoo, doctor? Only occasionally. I came to Nauvoo with money. I had had a mill in Canada already. Joseph said to me, "You must not be a doctor here. Buy lands, build mills, and keep a store to keep you running. As to practicing and not making anything, let some Gentiles come and do that. You look out for business and profit." I practiced, however, occasionally. Once John Taylor was taken with a very malignant fever. He was treated by his regular physician. I think Dr. Wells was his name. He grew worse and worse. At last I was called in, saw him and prescribed for him. They followed my prescriptions and he got better. This is, I believe, the worst thing I did in Nauvoo or anywhere else. What kind of men were the other editors of the Expositor? Dr. Foster was a fine physician and surgeon, and a very agreeable, lively, interesting man. The Higbees had been very good friends of Joseph in Missouri, and had served his cause there with a kind of boyish enthusiasm. Frank died long ago and Chauncey only lately. He had studied law, was an attorney, and sat on the bench for a while. He was quite intelligent. The father of the Higbees had been an excellent man. He died rather suddenly, and from that time there was something between his boys and Joseph. What kind of a physician was Dr. Bennett? He was a physician of the old school. I could not say whether he was very successful as a doctor or not. He was so much occupied for Joseph that he had no time to attend the sick. Did Joseph pay any salary to this Bismarck of his? I don't know, but in that honeymoon of favor which he enjoyed in his first Nauvoo time, Joseph gave him surely all he wanted. Did you ever hear Joseph speak of his money? Oh yes, he used to boast of his riches. He expressed the opinion that it was all important that he should be rich. I heard him say myself, it would be better that every man in the church should lose his last cent than that I should fall and go down.